All right, everyone, let's get into it. Today, we're going to be dissecting a show that, for a lot of us in the medical field, hits, well, a little too close to home. I'm talking about Fox's The Resident.
The show kicks off with this cold, hard truth right here, and it immediately tells you this isn't going to be one of those glossy, romanticized medical dramas. Nope, this is a critical look at the very system we all work in every single day.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll dive into that harsh reality the show loves to portray. Then, we'll tackle the big conflict. Is it about healing or is it just business? We'll meet the doctors fighting the system, see how they change over time, and wrap it all up with the big question the show leaves us to think about.
Okay, let's jump right in. The show is set in the fictional Chastain Park Memorial Hospital, and let me tell you, it's the perfect stage for the story they're trying to tell.
See, the show does this amazing job of presenting a hospital that, on the surface, looks absolutely flawless. You've got the harp music, the sleek design, it's all there. But that polished image is just a velvet curtain, and it's there to hide a much, much harsher reality.
And that brings us to the absolute core of the show. It's this constant, grinding battle between the art of actually healing people and the business of medicine.
The show basically frames the modern hospital as a business first and a sanctuary second. Patients can sometimes feel like they're just an extension of their insurance plan, And you see how medical decisions get twisted by the bottom line. Pressure to run expensive, unnecessary tests instead of just focusing on the best clinical practice.
And they don't pull any punches showing you how this works. I mean, right in the very first episode, a routine appendectomy goes horribly wrong. A patient dies because of a surgeon's hand tremor. And what happens next? The system just snaps into place to protect itself. They completely fabricate the cause of death to dodge a lawsuit and save their star surgeon's reputation.
What the show argues is that these cover-ups aren't just one-off moments of panic. They're practically a science. It starts with one person's ego, gets supercharged by the hospital's financial interests, and then it's all enforced by abusing the power structure to silence anyone who might speak up.
So, in a system that's this broken, who are the people fighting it, or enabling it, or just trying to get through the day? Let's meet the key players.
The whole story really revolves around the dynamic between these two. You've got Conrad Hawkins, this cynical, rule-breaking senior resident, and then you've got Devon Pravesh, the brilliant, by-the-book intern he has to train. Their initial clash and how it grows into mutual respect really drives the whole show forward. And they're surrounded by this amazing cast of characters, where each person kind of represents a different way of dealing with this ethical minefield. You have Nick, the fierce patient advocate who's the hospital's true conscience, all the way to Dr. Bell, who at first is basically everything wrong with the system. It really makes you ask, what would I do? Now here's what I think is the most powerful part of the show. Over 6 seasons, these characters don't just stay the same. They grow, they evolve, and that's where the show finds its real heart.
And the emotional core of the entire series is without a doubt the relationship between Conrad and Nick. We watch them go from getting back together, to getting married, to having their daughter, and then we have to go through the absolutely devastating tragedy of Nick's death in season 5. It's a powerful journey of love, loss, and eventually healing.
But if you want to talk about true change, you've got to look at Dr. Randolph Bell. I mean, this guy starts as the villain. The residents even call him Hodad, Hands of Death and Destruction. But by the end of the series, he finds redemption. He becomes a real force for good in the very hospital he almost ruined. It's an incredible arc.
So, after 6 seasons, where do we land? What's the final diagnosis here? What are the big things we should take away from our time at Chastain Park? I think this series really leaves us with 3 truths that can feel pretty uncomfortable because they're so real. 1, medicine is a business. 2, power without transparency is incredibly dangerous. And 3, at the end of the day, the last line of defense for a patient is often just one person's courage and integrity.
And that's the real kicker, isn't it? That's the question The Resident leaves us with. It stops being about a TV show and turns the camera right back on us, asking a question that echoes in our own operating rooms, our own clinics, our own hospitals every single day. Where does your compass point?
Welcome to this special review from Anesthesia and Perioperative Medicine. We're going under the knife to dissect the medical drama, The Resident. We're going to find out just how much of its sharp critique of the healthcare system, well, how much of it really hits close to home for us.
Everything you thought you knew about medicine is wrong. All the rules you followed will break. I mean, wow, that single line from senior resident Conrad Hawkins, it just sets the stage for the entire show, doesn't it? This isn't your typical story about medical miracles. No, this is all about the harsh and sometimes brutal reality of medicine as a business.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with how the show mirrors medicine, then we'll walk through the first 3 seasons, the internal corruption, the corporate villains, and the final takeover. And we'll wrap up with some of the big questions the show leaves us with. All right, let's dive right in. Okay, Section 1, a mirror to medicine. And really, it's about the battle for the very soul of a hospital. So the whole show is set at Chastain Park Memorial Hospital. It's this fictional place in Atlanta, but it quickly becomes this battleground for 2 totally different ways of thinking about medicine. And that conflict, it's perfectly embodied in these 2 characters. On one side, you've got Dr. Devon Pravesh. He's the bright-eyed, idealistic intern, fresh out of Harvard, believes in the system, follows the rules. He sees medicine as a calling. And then you've got his mentor, Dr. Conrad Hawkins. He's the jaded, seen-it-all realist who was absolutely determined to shatter Devon's illusions and show him the brutal truth, that at the end of the day, medicine is a business. All right, let's get into Season 1, internal corruption, or as they call it, the rot from within. Right from the get-go, the show makes a really bold claim. The biggest threat to patients isn't cancer or heart disease. It's the very doctors and the system that's supposed to be protecting them. And the main villain here is the chief of surgery himself, Dr. Randolph Bell. Now, this is a guy whose aging hands and massive ego have become, well, a truly lethal combination. In fact, the residents have a nickname for him, a really chilling one, HODAD, the hands of death and destruction. And here we see the anatomy of a cover-up, something that, unfortunately, might feel a little too familiar to some of us in the medical field. It all starts with a mistake. During a simple appendectomy, Dr. Bell's hand tremor causes him to tear the patient's artery. But instead of owning it, what happens? He immediately creates a false story, blaming an unpredictable cardiac arrest under anesthesia. They find some family history to back it up, and then comes the final step. The whole surgical team is pressured to stay quiet, all to protect one man, and of course, to protect the hospital from a lawsuit. And this just lays it all out, black and white. Look at the difference between the official report and what actually happened in that OR. The official event? Cardiac arrest under anesthesia. The truth? An uncontrolled bleed from a surgical error. The official reason? A heart condition. The real reason? The surgeon's hand tremor. So what's called an unavoidable tragedy was actually preventable medical malpractice. And that gap between perception and reality, that is a central driving theme of this show. So if you thought Dr. Bell was bad, well, he represented a kind of corruption born from incompetence and ego. But then there's Dr. Lane Hunter. And she represents something else entirely, pure, calculated evil. This woman, a celebrated oncologist, was running a massive insurance fraud scheme. Think about this. She was telling perfectly healthy people they had cancer and then pumping them full of high-dose chemo just for the profit. And when our hero, nurse practitioner Nick Nevin, started to figure it out, Hunter didn't just fire her. She framed her, got her arrested, and turned one of the hospital's best nurses into an outcast. So by the end of Season 1, it's been a total roller coaster. It starts with Devon's idealism getting completely wrecked by Conrad. Then Nick uncovers this horrifying fraud and gets framed for it. The climax is great. Dr. Hunter's crimes finally come to light. She gets arrested. But here's the kicker, the finale. In all that chaos, Dr. Bell sees his chance. He manipulates the board, gets the CEO fired, and takes the job himself. So one villain is in jail, but the other one, he's just failed his way right to the top, proving that in this system, sometimes the worst people absolutely win. Okay, on to Season 2. Corporate villains. Now, the threat isn't just coming from inside the hospital anymore. It's evolving. We're moving from individual bad doctors to a whole corrupt corporation that's about to infect Chastain from the outside. And our new villain is a company called Quavitus. On the surface, they're this powerful, prestigious medical device company. They're supplying Chastain with all the latest and greatest tech. But of course, they're hiding a really deadly secret. This is a company that puts profits way ahead of patient safety, and they perfectly represent that dangerous place where medicine and big business collide, and where technology that's supposed to save lives just becomes another tool for greed. So what was their playbook? It was pretty simple. And absolutely terrifying. First, they rush faulty medical devices to the market with nowhere near enough testing. Then, they just falsify the safety data to trick the FDA into approving them. After that, they pressure doctors to use their expensive, super high-risk products. And if anyone on the inside tries to speak up, they silence them. In one case, a device rep just disappears. It's a perfect storm of corporate crime.
And this whole storyline becomes this huge battle against a corporate giant. At the beginning of the season, it's actually CEO Bell who champions bringing Covetus into the hospital, but it doesn't take long for the patient complications and deaths to start skyrocketing. So Conrad and Devon start investigating, and they get help from a really unexpected source. Conrad's own estranged father, who just so happens to be the new chairman of the board. And it's that team-up that finally manages to expose the whole company and bring it crashing down.
So that brings us to Season 3, The Takeover. And the subtitle here says it all. Profit becomes the only patient. Just when you think things can't get any worse, the entire hospital gets sold to a private equity firm, and the crisis just hits a whole new level. Meet Red Rock Mountain Medical. This is a ruthless, for-profit conglomerate, and they buy Chastain Park with one single mission: maximize revenue at all costs. You know, Red Rock really is the final evolution of the show's entire critique. It's the complete corporatization of healthcare. The hospital isn't a place for healing anymore. It's just an asset on a balance sheet, something to be squeezed for every single dollar. And you can see here just how fundamentally Red Rock's philosophy changed everything. At Chastain, the mission was to treat the sick, no matter who they were. Under Red Rock, the mandate was to prioritize patients with the best insurance. Surgery used to be based on medical necessity. Now, it's all driven by billing potential. And staffing, which was physician-led, is now controlled by management, all for efficiency. The entire hospital was just rewired to serve the bottom line. And this, right here, shows you the ultimate price you pay for fighting back in a corporate system. Conrad is constantly clashing with Red Rock's star neurosurgeon, this guy Dr. Kane, who's all about profit. The breaking point comes when Conrad goes against Red Rock protocol to get a life-saving organ transplant for a patient they deemed non-profitable. And what's his reward for this heroic act? Red Rock management sees their chance and they fire their most vocal critic. And the real punch to the gut? It happens on the exact same day he gets promoted to chief resident. But you know, something really interesting happened as the hospital changed. So did its original villain. Remember Dr. Bell from Season 1? The guy who covered up his own mistakes? Well, by Season 3, he's been completely stripped of his power by the same corporate machine he helped let in the door. And it starts him on this slow, complicated path to redemption. He actually starts a medical talk show and begins to expose the very same kinds of truths he used to hide. It's a fascinating turnaround. So, Chastain's lingering questions. After 3 seasons of all this corruption, conspiracy, and corporate greed, what's the takeaway? What are we in the real world of medicine supposed to make of all this?
I think the show argues pretty relentlessly that it's not enough to just be a good doctor. You have to fight to work inside a good system. It hammers home the point that systemic failures are almost always more dangerous than one person's mistake. It shows how financial pressures create these impossible ethical choices for us. And maybe most importantly, it reminds us that advocating for our patients is a necessary act of resistance, even when it's risky. It really is about speaking up, even when you're speaking up against a powerful hierarchy.
And that really leaves us with the big, provocative question, doesn't it? The Resident is fiction, for sure, but how much of its critique is actually fact? Yeah, the drama is turned up for TV, no doubt about it, but it forces us to look in the mirror and ask a really uncomfortable question. How much of Chastain Park's broken system is a reflection of our own?
Hello and welcome. You know, we often watch these medical dramas and can't help but wonder how much of this is actually real. Well, the brilliant thing about The Resident was that it was never shy about showing the messy, complicated truth of modern medicine, that constant tug-of-war between caring for patients and turning a profit. Today, in this special review from Anesthesia and Perioperative Medicine, we're going to dive deep into the show's absolutely gripping final 3 seasons. We're talking about the huge shocks, the devastating heartbreaks, and the incredible triumphs that brought the story of Chastain Park Memorial Hospital to a close.
You know, this quote absolutely nails what made The Resident feel so different right from the very beginning. This was not your typical shiny, happy medical show. Oh no. It made the argument, week after week, that a hospital is not just a place for healing, it's a business. And that central conflict, that idea of doctors fighting for their patients against a system that's often just trying to make money, well, that's the powerful, brutal engine that drives the whole show. And believe me, it has never been more obvious than in these final 3 seasons.
Right, so here's our plan for today. We're going to look at the crisis and rebirth in Season 4. Then we'll have to navigate the absolutely devastating loss that pretty much defines Season 5. And finally, we'll get into the final battle for Chastain's survival in Season 6, before we wrap it all up by looking at the show's incredible legacy of resilience. Okay, let's dive in. Okay, season 4. Wow. This season just dropped us right into a reality that we all knew intimately, didn't we? The absolute fear and chaos of the COVID-19 pandemic. And for the doctors at Chastain, this was more than just fighting a virus on the front lines. It was a season that really mirrored all of our anxieties, while at the same time forcing a total reset inside the hospital itself. It was a time of crisis, for sure, but also a time of incredible rebirth. Talk about an emotional roller coaster. This timeline really just scratches the surface of the whiplash we all felt watching season 4. I mean, it kicks off with this incredibly grim and exhausting look at the pandemic, a reality that was all too real. But then, right in the middle of all that darkness, the show gives us this beautiful moment of pure joy. Conrad and Nick finally tie the knot. But of course, this is The Resident, so happiness is always temporary. We watch in horror as Devon Pravesh loses his own father to the virus. And just as we're celebrating Conrad and Nick's pregnancy, she's brutally stabbed by a patient, putting both her and the baby's life on the line. It's just this constant push and pull between sheer joy and utter tragedy that makes the season so compelling, all the way to the end, where we get the miracle of baby Gigi's birth, but then have to say a devastating goodbye to a character we all loved.
And really, the entire season hinges on this massive fundamental shift you see here. For so long, Chastain was being strangled by Red Rock Mountain Medical, this profit-obsessed corporation that saw patients not as people, but as numbers on a balance sheet. And when Red Rock decides to sell off the hospital to be turned into luxury flats, it looks like it's all over. But in a stunning last-minute save, Chastain is converted into a public, state-run hospital. Now, this wasn't just a change of name on the door, it was a revolution in philosophy. And with the absolutely brilliant and compassionate Dr. Kit Voss stepping in as the new CEO, the mission was suddenly so clear: to prove you could put patients first and not just survive, but actually succeed. It was nothing less than a battle for the hospital's soul.
You know, one of the most gut-wrenching parts of this whole season was saying goodbye to the incredible, formidable Dr. Mina Okafor. After her visa renewal gets sabotaged by a vengeful Barrett Kane, of course, she's facing deportation. But in a truly powerful moment, Mina takes back control. She decides she won't be forced out, she will return to Nigeria on her own terms. This, of course, leads to one of the most heartbreaking farewells in the show's history, with her mentor and the love of her life, AJ Austin. He's all set to follow her, but in a truly cruel twist of fate, his mother is diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, and he has to stay. The loss of Mina leaves the Raptor completely adrift, losing not just his romantic partner, but his partner in the operating theater too.
So, what about the show's #1 villain, the arrogant Dr. Barrett Kane? Well, you could say karma finally caught up with him, quite literally, in the shape of an ambulance. While trying to be the hero for a change, he's hit by the vehicle and suffers a hand injury that threatens his entire career. And just like that, the all-powerful surgeon is now a patient, vulnerable, and trapped in the very system he exploited for his own gain. It's this experience, this humbling, and a connection he makes with a long-term patient named Rose that finally starts to chip away at that tough exterior. It's the beginning of a long, slow journey towards becoming something, well, something like a better person.
Right, on to season 5. And I have to say, this is the season where everything just completely changed. The one that, let's be honest, broke all of our hearts. It's all about a loss so huge, it tears right through the middle of the hospital. And it's about that long, painful journey of trying to figure out how on earth do you go on when the absolute unthinkable happens.
The season starts off by tricking us, really. It paints this beautiful picture of domestic happiness. Conrad and Nick, they finally found their rhythm, juggling their crazy careers with the pure joy of raising their little girl, Gigi. You look at them and you think, okay, they are truly, deeply happy. And then it's all gone. In one single horrifying moment, everything is just shattered. A sudden, unexplained single car crash on a quiet road changes everything, forever. There's no reason, no one else involved, just a random, cruel twist of fate that sends an absolute shockwave of grief through everyone at Chastain.
And this is where the show makes its bravest and most heartbreaking decision ever. Nick Nevin, who was really the moral heart of the hospital, Conrad's soulmate, she sustains a traumatic brain injury, and there's nothing anyone can do. Her own friends, her family at the hospital, they have to make that impossible decision and declare her brain dead. The loss is just unimaginable. It leaves Conrad a widowed single dad, and the entire hospital is left reeling. Now, we know this was driven by the actress Emily Van Camp deciding to leave the show, but the impact that it had on the story was just absolutely devastating.
So how do you even begin to move a story on from a loss that huge? Well, the show's solution was to jump through time. After a few episodes dealing with that immediate, raw grief of Nick's death, the story catapults forward 3 years. It's a clever move, really. It gives the characters that off-screen time and space to grieve and to start rebuilding their lives. But for us, the big question is, who are these people now?
So this table gives us a great little snapshot of the new reality after the time jump. Conrad, who'd left Chastain to become a concierge doctor so he could have better hours to raise Gigi, is finally back in the ER. And in his place, Nick's best friend, the amazing neurosurgeon Billy Sutton, has stepped up massively. She's now the chief of surgery and has become an absolute rock for Conrad and Gigi. But of course, life has thrown others some major curveballs. Dr. Randolph Bell, right in the middle of his big redemption story, is now secretly battling a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. But through it all, he's found this incredible love and support with CEO Kit Voss. Their friendship has finally become a proper romance. And our younger doctors, like Devon and Leela, are now in settled, long-term relationships. Everyone's changed. Everyone's had to find a new way forward.
The time jump also brings in a whole host of new faces and some incredibly messy new storylines. We meet Dr. Cade Sullivan, a brilliant but very mysterious ER doctor who has an immediate spark with Conrad. Then her estranged father, Dr. Ian Sullivan, also joins the team. He's a superstar pediatric surgeon who is hiding a terrible drug addiction. We also meet Leela's re-spirited twin sister, Padma, who shows up and asks a still-grieving A.J. Austin to be her sperm donor. And then, in what might be the most personal story of all, Billy Sutton's past comes crashing back into her life when Trevor, the biological son she gave up for adoption after being sexually assaulted at 13, starts at Chastain as a new resident. So yeah, the drama definitely did not take a 3-year break.
Right, so after this whole season of healing and finding a new normal, the finale brings Conrad to a massive crossroads. He remembers a conversation he had with Nick where she actually gave him her blessing to find love again if something ever happened to her. And at a party, he finally feels ready. He looks across the room and he sees 2 women. There's Cade, who represents this exciting new chapter, and then there's Billy, his steady, loyal friend who has been right there by his side through the absolute worst. And the season ends right there. It just leaves us all hanging with this one massive question to take into the final season.
Which brings us to Season 6, the final chapter. And just when it seems like everyone's personal lives are starting to find some sort of balance, the hospital itself is thrown into its biggest crisis yet. This forces our doctors into one last, absolutely desperate fight for the future of Chastain. The big fight in the final season is a classic David versus Goliath story. On one side, you've got this ruthless new politician, Governor Mark Betts, who decides that slashing the public hospital's budget is an easy way to score political points. And on the other side, you've got our hero, CEO Kit Voss, who wages an all-out war to protect her hospital, her doctors, and their mission to care for everyone, not just the ones who can pay. It is literally a fight for Chastain's survival. And then, oh, the irony is just perfect. Governor Betts is in a horrific helicopter crash. And where do they bring him? The one place that has to treat him, Chastain Park. He needs a heart transplant to survive, and his life is literally in the hands of Kit Voss, Randolph Bell, and the very doctors he was trying to put out of a job. They have to swallow their pride, uphold their oath, and save him. And they do. And by performing this incredible surgery, they publicly shame his office into restoring all of the hospital's funding. Chastain is saved by the very integrity its enemy tried to destroy. It's brilliant. So what happened with that massive love triangle? Well, the season premiere reveals pretty quickly that Conrad chose Cade, and they give it a real go. There's a genuine connection there, but it soon becomes clear that there's this emotional wall that he just can't quite get past with her. The relationship is also really complicated by her father's addiction battle, and in the end, they both just sort of realize that while they care for each other, it's not that once-in-a-lifetime love. They end things as friends. And of course, this left the door wide open for what, let's face it, many of us saw coming all along. Conrad's journey leads him to this really profound realization. The person who truly got him, the one who had been a rock for him and for Gigi through the darkest times, was Billy. Their deep, solid friendship had just quietly and naturally grown into love. So, in the series finale, they finally tell each other how they feel, bringing Conrad's story full circle and giving him a really well-deserved, peaceful, happy ending. The final season really made sure that every major character got the ending they deserved. We got these beautiful new beginnings, like celebrating the long-awaited wedding of Kit and a much healthier Belle in the show's 100th episode, and Devon proposing to Leela. But it also showed our characters facing new, very real challenges. AJ becomes a father to twins and has to support Padma through a really powerful and well-handled postpartum depression storyline. And finally, it gave us hope, as Ian Sullivan hits his rock bottom, finally admits he has a problem, and starts on the road to recovery. It was all about bringing everyone's story to a hopeful, satisfying conclusion. So,
After 6 seasons, 107 episodes, countless medical puzzles, and so much personal drama, what is the lasting impact of The Resident? What is its legacy?
I think that brings us to the final and most important question. We've seen them perform surgical miracles, we've seen them solve impossible cases over and over again. But was that ever really the point? Or was the show's real message about the daily heroism of just fighting against a broken system? A system that too often puts profits, politics, and power ahead of the simple fundamental need to care for another human being.
In the end, this is the show's final diagnosis. It was always so much more than a medical drama. It was a sharp, honest critique of the business of healthcare, and it was a powerful tribute to the doctors, the nurses, and all the staff who, despite all the pressure, refuse to forget the person in the hospital bed. They fight for ethics, they champion empathy, and they remind us all that medicine, at its very heart, isn't a business, it's a battle for humanity. Thanks so much for joining me for this look back at The Resident.